What if everything you thought you knew about living a righteous life was just scratching the surface? Imagine standing on that sunlit hill, feeling the cool breeze as Jesus opens his mouth, not to condemn, but to redefine what it truly means to be blessed, to be pure, to be just. His words weren't comfortable. They overturned expectations and ignited a revolution in the hearts of all who listened. What kind of righteousness calls us to love our enemies, to turn the other cheek, to see blessing not in power but in meekness and mercy? Few realize how radical, how upside down the Sermon on the Mount truly is, a manifesto that flips the world's values on their head. Today, you'll discover why Jesus' teachings were more than gentle wisdom. They were a spiritual earthquake, shaking the foundations of tradition. Few understand the depth of the invitation, to see righteousness not as rule-keeping, but as a transformation from the inside out. What you're about to learn will challenge your deepest beliefs. Are you ready to step beyond the surface and hear the voice that calls you higher? Keep watching, because once you see righteousness through the eyes of the Master, you'll never see yourself or your world the same way again. It's a moment lost to time, yet one that reverberates across centuries, a hillside overlooking the Sea of Galilee, shimmering under the early sun. Picture the dust swirling at your feet, the hush that settles over the expectant crowd, and the sudden stillness as Jesus begins to speak. You may have read or heard these words countless times, but to truly understand their power, you need to step into that ancient world, feel the tensions, and taste the hope mingled with confusion in the air. Many imagine the Sermon on the Mount as merely gentle moral guidance. But what if instead you realized it was a declaration meant to disrupt everything the people thought was sacred and secure? Most of Jesus' listeners were ordinary, fishermen with salt-roughened hands, mothers balancing babies on their hips, merchants, tax collectors, and outcasts drawing near, unsure if righteousness could ever touch their lives. Their hearts thudded with the weight of Roman oppression outside and the heavy demands of religious law within. Why did Jesus choose this mountainside? You might be wondering about the setting, the symbolism beneath the sunlit grass. In Jewish tradition, mountains were places of divine revelation. Moses received the law on Sinai. Elijah heard God's whisper on Horeb. Now, another figure sits down, not to thunder commandments from above, but to speak with authority that draws even the most bruised soul. The Gospel of Matthew presents a not-so-subtle echo. Just as Moses delivered God's word from a mountain, Jesus now offers a radically new vision. But what would righteousness look like to those gathered? For centuries, righteousness meant something very clear: meticulous rule-keeping, public displays of piety, striving to measure up to an impossibly high standard. The Pharisees, masters of the law, seemed to have it all figured out, at least on the surface, but deep within the hearts of the crowd, a wind-swept longing stirred. Could there be more to righteousness than endless striving and silent shame? Imagine the tension, the crowd hanging on every word, wondering, would Jesus offer a path for the poor, the forgotten, the heartbroken? Many believed righteousness belonged only to a chosen few, those who lived behind religious walls. But the profound truth is, Jesus' first words shattered the walls and let light pour in. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:3. The opening line itself is a spiritual earthquake. It's as if Jesus is saying, you who feel furthest from God are the very ones God delights to call home. But wait, with every phrase, blessed are those who mourn, the meek, the merciful. Jesus goes deeper, painting a vision of righteousness that doesn't start on the outside but on the inside, in the soil of brokenness, humility, and longing. This was no accidental choice of words. Every blessed are is loaded with echoes. In the Psalms, blessed describes those who walk closely with God, but now blessing spills over even to those society saw as unworthy. Do you feel the contrast? The old order declares, blessed are the strong, the successful. Jesus counters, blessed are the overlooked, the hungry for righteousness, the peacemakers. You might be wondering, why were his words so unsettling to the leaders and so stunning to the crowds? Here's a secret often missed. Jesus, by calling his disciples the salt of the earth and the light of the world, transfers the holy calling from religious elites to everyone who listens with an open heart. Imagine the sensation, a fisherman or servant hearing that heaven's kingdom is wide open to them. A vivid image, hands calloused by labor, faces sun-baked, stepping out of the shadows into the sudden warmth of divine dignity. Let's pause and look even closer at the historical moment. Jerusalem's temple loomed far away, the symbolic heart of Jewish faith. The law, read aloud in synagogues, detailed hundreds of commandments, a rigorous path that seemed to wind higher and higher up a mountain of impossibility. The penalty for missing a single step? Shame, exclusion, even public condemnation. As Jesus sits among the wildflowers and rocks, he doesn't abolish the law, he fulfills it. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Matthew 5:17. Can you sense the tremor this sent through the listeners? The one before them claimed authority even greater than Moses. Here's where the paradox stings. Many thought righteousness was a ladder to God, every rung earned by effort and outward compliance. But Jesus reveals the heart-shaking truth. True righteousness is a gift that transforms you from the inside out. He presses deeper, saying, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:20. The crowd's collective breath must have caught. Who could ever be that righteous? The air grows thick with a mix of dread and hope. Is Jesus closing the door or opening a path hidden for centuries? This shows us something profound about God's heart. He is not seeking flawless ritual, but radical surrender. Righteousness, in Jesus' vision, is not measured in public approval, but secret purity, in kindness that runs deeper than social custom, in mercy that flows from soul to soul like living water. But let's not romanticize the moment. The world Jesus spoke into was fiercely divided, religious versus secular, holy versus unclean, Roman versus Jew, rich versus poor. Every command, every blessing landed like a ripple across a pond of tension. You have heard that it was said, Jesus repeats, only to upend the tradition, not with more rules, but with piercing honesty. But I say to you, the people might have wondered, who, truly, is this man who speaks with such authority? Is this just another teacher, or the long-promised Messiah stepping out of prophecy into living history? Imagine feeling the weight of that hope. Many, standing on that hillside, had memorized promises their ancestors clung to in the darkness. Isaiah's vision of a servant who would bring justice. Jeremiah's longing for a new covenant where God's law would be written on human hearts. Now Jesus' words ring with the timbre of fulfillment, as if a long, slumbering dream has begun to awaken. Do you see the pattern? The Sermon on the Mount is much more than a list of do's and don'ts. It's a spiritual invitation wrapped in historical shockwaves, a call to become citizens of a kingdom not defined by the sword or the temple, but by hearts surrendered to a new standard, far higher and yet startlingly more accessible than anyone dared hope. You might be asking, if Jesus didn't lower the bar, and if external righteousness wasn't enough, what kind of life was he calling people into? This is the thrilling pivot in the story. The moment ancient tradition bends and something entirely new is placed within reach. What happened next changed everything. not just for those gathered under the Galilean sun, but for every heart hungering for meaning ever since. Jesus would take the law, not to relax it, but to intensify it, to move the goalposts from external acts to internal transformation, from public restraint to secret burning purity. The sermon begins with blessing, but what follows will shake the foundations of complacency. And so, as the echoes of his first words die away and the crowd leans in, the real mystery emerges. What is the new righteousness, and how can people like us ever attain it? But this raises an even deeper question, a question that will send us spiraling from history into the very heart of spiritual reality. If Jesus' vision of righteousness rewrites the rules of God and man, what then does it truly mean to be righteous? And how do we draw near to that heavenly standard he sets before us? What you'll discover next will change your understanding of holiness forever. If the hillside crowd felt their worlds tremble at Jesus' opening words, what followed would shatter their spiritual assumptions, and ours. Because now, with the law echoing from every stone, Jesus does the unthinkable. He takes ancient commandments, flawless and revered, and peels them back, laying bare the soul beneath their surface. The journey into spiritual insight begins here, in the radical shift from outward compliance to inner transformation. Picture the atmosphere. The air is charged, as if you could reach out and touch the anticipation trembling through the crowd. You might be wondering, what is so revolutionary about these teachings? Why do they pierce through time and continue to unsettle us? The answer unfolds in a deeper truth. Jesus is not merely a new lawgiver. He is the revealer of God's heart, inviting us to see beneath the letter and touch the living spirit of the law. Listen as Jesus speaks. You have heard that it was said, but I say to you. Suddenly, familiar commandments, the untouchable pillars, are thrown into stark relief. You shall not murder becomes not just the prohibition of violence, but the surgical spotlight on hidden anger, contempt, unforgiveness. You shall not commit adultery becomes more than physical faithfulness. It is a mirror turned to the secret desires of the heart. Imagine the shock. No longer is righteousness measured in actions alone, but in secret motives, in the silent dialogues of our souls. Many believe that following rules is enough, but the profound truth is this: Jesus' teaching exposes even our best efforts, urging us toward a righteousness that no one can fake. He lays open the depths where resentment festers, where private fantasies conflict with public virtue. Can you feel the tension building? This call is not a gentler law, but an impossible one, unless something changes deep within. Here comes that rhythm Jesus so masterfully employs, raising tension with impossible standards, then hinting at relief that God is more interested in the truths we hide than the masks we wear. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Matthew 5:29. His words sound hyperbolic, even frightening, but the point is clear. Jesus wants transformation, not cosmetic change. He isn't satisfied with polished exteriors. He thirsts for purity that penetrates our bones. You might be asking, if this is righteousness, who can ever stand? Wouldn't everyone, even the most devoted, fall short? And that is precisely where the spiritual insight shines through, like a dawn after storm. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. True righteousness in Jesus' kingdom is not won by striving but received by surrender, a divine gift to those who acknowledge their need. This shows us something profound. God's desire is not for perfect actors, but for honest seekers. Each paradox in Jesus' teaching is a gentle, relentless invitation deeper. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. Matthew 5:44-45. Imagine the impact. No faith had ever made enemy love the evidence of godlikeness. The old order blesses its friends. Jesus says, heaven looks for hearts that lavish kindness where it is least deserved. In these words, the Sermon on the Mount becomes a window into a different reality, a reversal of what humanity expects from religion. Righteousness is less a badge to be displayed and more a burning light inside, revealing every hidden room of the heart. This is not a checklist, but a journey inward and upward. Abstract ideas suddenly become personal. Who among us has not harbored secret anger, nursed silent grudges, measured love by those who love in return? The soil of the heart is exposed. Jesus amplifies the tension. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Matthew 5:48. But how can finite, flawed people stand in the blinding presence of divine perfection? The old path was hard, but this sounds utterly impossible, like demanding an eagle to swim or a fish to climb a tree. Yet here, revelation breaks through. Perfection in God's eyes isn't flawlessness of behavior, but fullness of love, completeness of mercy, wholeness of grace. The command is utterly daunting until you see the secret. Jesus is pulling us toward a life saturated not with rule-keeping, but with divine presence. You might be wondering, what about practices like prayer, giving, and fasting, those ancient engines of devotion? Jesus turns even these upside down, relocating God not in the applause of crowds, but in the secret place. When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. Matthew 6:6. This is a kingdom of the unseen. Every outward act is emptied of meaning if the inner life is sick. But even the smallest act, unnoticed by the world, is treasured by God if it flows from a heart aligned with His. Suddenly, the sermon unfolds with a rhythm: revelation, implication, and then invitation. Righteousness now becomes relationship, to be seen by the God who loves in secret, who weighs motives more than sacrifices. The people once burdened by rituals now glimpse freedom. It is not about impressing others or even ourselves, but about being completely known, warts, wounds, and all, and still called beloved. But do not think this spiritual insight leaves us with easy comfort. Jesus warns, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 6:21. He exposes the contest for our loyalty: God or mammon, faith or anxiety, light or darkness. The heart is a battleground, and righteousness is the victory of trust over fear, gratitude over worry. Imagine the liberation and the terror of giving up the illusion of control and placing your story in the hands of a Father who calls you to seek first His kingdom and His righteousness. It's a seismic shift. Righteousness is not a ladder to climb, but a river to step into. Many want to dip a toe. Jesus calls us to dive deep, to let go of every lesser identity in favor of being called child of God. The spiritual invitation opens wider. Come as you are, but do not expect to remain unchanged. His words are both furnace and dew, burning away our pride, softening our bruised places, forging a new heart in the wilderness of the old. Here is a mini conclusion, a spiritual aha. The Sermon on the Mount is not instructions for self-improvement. It is a map to surrendered transformation. God's righteousness is not an external standard, but an inner rebirth, heaven breaking into humanity, drop by drop, moment by moment. Yet the tension lingers. If this righteousness is so inward, so hidden, how are we to know if we are walking in it? How can such intangible truths become living realities in a world of bills, betrayals, broken families, and broken dreams? Here, Jesus gives yet another paradox. Judge not, lest you be judged, for with the measure you use it will be measured to you. Grace received becomes grace extended. Those who discover divine mercy are called to mirror it, even in the daily grind. Still, you might be feeling that unease. Can anyone really live this way? Is Jesus painting ideals that belong only in heaven? But pause and sense the invitation wrapped even in the challenge. The patterns of this world, self-protection, resentment, comparison, anxiety, are exposed, so something infinitely better can take root. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. Matthew 7:7. The new righteousness is birthed not from crushing effort, but from hungry pursuit. The entire spiritual journey narrows to one yearning, to receive what only God can grant. This reveals something astonishing and practical. The true test of righteousness, according to Jesus, is not how flawlessly we keep commandments, but how deeply we trust the giver, how willingly we let his Spirit remake us day by day. But even as the sermon comes to its close, another tension crackles in the air, the gap between the dazzling heights of Jesus' ideal and the dusty road of daily life. How do these divine insights collide with the clutter, conflict, and chaos of our modern existence? What you're about to discover in the next part will take the fire of these teachings and plunge them into the heart of everyday reality. Because when the radical righteousness of the Sermon on the Mount steps off the mountainside and into today's world, everything from your relationships to your routines can be transformed. The greatest mystery remains. What does it look like practically to live these words now? And the revelations ahead may surprise you even more than those that came before. Step down from the mountain with me, out of the pages of ancient text, across centuries of echoes, into the restless noise of our world. Here, skyscrapers replace olive trees, and notifications drown out the wind across Galilee's hills. But the question throbs on. Can Jesus' vision of righteousness not only survive, but blaze bright in the complexity of modern life? Imagine this. The Sermon on the Mount, words spoken under the open sky, now pulsing through office elevators, school hallways, crowded metros, and hushed midnight bedrooms where hearts ache to know what is truly right. Many believe these teachings belong only in sermons or silent monasteries. But the profound truth is, they are dynamite for real life, meant for ordinary people in extraordinary struggle. Think for a moment of the simple command, love your enemies. It's easy to nod in theory, but look closer. What does this look like in flesh and blood? In a world scarred by betrayal, competition, and division. Picture a woman in business whose ideas are stolen by a rival, her anger crackling just beneath the surface. The world tells her to retaliate, to outmaneuver, to enact quiet revenge. But then, a choice. She prays for her rivals. Well-being, fights down bitterness, and returns grace instead of venom. Feel the dissonance, the tension Jesus creates between what feels natural and what he calls supernatural. You might be wondering, does being righteous mean letting others walk all over me? Hold that question. Because the sermon doesn't teach passivity, it commands radical initiative. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Matthew 5:41. In the Roman world, a soldier could demand a Jew carry his pack a mile, a humiliating symbol of oppression. But Jesus flips the script. Don't just comply. Go further. Defy resentment with extravagant goodwill. Now see this principle bloom in modern times. Someone cut you off in traffic, a harsh word from a spouse, an unfair teacher at school. How do you respond when injustice hits close? The world expects a grudge. Jesus dares you to answer with generosity. Pause and let this land. The teaching of Jesus isn't a fragile antique, it's a living fire, inviting us to rebel against cycles of payback in homes, workplaces, and online spaces. Imagine feeling the weight of this truth when a social media feud flares up, tempting you to respond with the same venom, but instead you speak peace, seeking understanding more than victory. Real-world righteousness shows up not in grand gestures, but in daily acts of refusing to be ruled by bitterness. This shows us something deeper about spiritual courage. Righteousness, in the sermon's vision, isn't about being a doormat. It's armored vulnerability. It's daring to forgive before you're asked, to admit wrong before you're exposed, to protect the dignity of others, even when yours feels under attack. Imagine a father apologizing first to his child, or a manager owning a mistake, breaking the icy silence with humility. Every act of secret. Righteousness is an act of resistance against this age of image and self-preservation. But let's go further still. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Matthew 6:19. In a world obsessed with accumulation and status, Jesus' words are disorienting. Consider the young professional who forgoes a high-paying job to serve in a non-profit, investing in unseen futures. Or a retiree who chooses simplicity, releasing wealth to support struggling families. You might ask, does this mean poverty is spiritual? Not at all. The tension is subtler. It's about detaching your worth from your possession. It's about leveraging every resource as a tool for love, never as a measure of self. Think of a community rallying together after a disaster, pooling resources for those who lost everything. Or a teen sharing lunch with a lonely classmate in the cafeteria, breaking the economics of popularity with simple kindness. These are the living parables where righteousness walks in sneakers and jeans. In every act of selfless giving, we see the sermon come alive. Treasures built not in vaults, but in hearts knit together by compassion. You may be thinking, this sounds noble, but what about when anxiety floods my mind, bills looming, relationships fracturing, health uncertain? Jesus knows this ache. His voice breaks through, soft and commanding. Do not worry about tomorrow. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Matthew 6:33-34. Here is the stress test. In a world inhaling worry, the righteous exhale trust. Imagine praying over spreadsheets and medicine bottles and still choosing to believe that beneath the chaos, your Father sees and cares. But this is not escape from reality, it's the fiercest engagement with it. Jesus doesn't deny pain, he redirects our gaze, calls us to a trust strong enough to hold our fear. Picture the nurse in an overwhelmed hospital, pausing to pray for each patient, her heart pounding with anxiety, yet surrendering each unknown to God. Or the single parent, facing another sleepless night, whispering hope into the dark because deep down they stake life on a promise God is near. Let's pause for a mini aha moment. The sermon's righteousness is not spectacular heroics, but ordinary faithfulness multiplied day after day. It's found in the mother forgiving her teenager, the friend returning blessing for gossip, the worker refusing to cut corners when no one is watching. In every small yes to mercy, the kingdom advances. Yet there's a paradox at work. Many think living by the sermon's code means isolation, being too spiritual for the real world. But the profound, often overlooked truth is, Jesus calls us deeper into the fabric of life, into tougher conversations and messier reconciliation. Imagine the difference in a city where people forgive debts freely, reconcile before lawsuits, embrace the foreigner, and champion the voiceless. Here, righteousness transforms the tapestry of society from fractured to whole. But here's the hard edge. Practicing this righteousness is costly. Enter through the narrow gate, Jesus warns, Matthew 7:13. When you resist gossip or show kindness to a bitter co-worker or say no to unethical profit, it feels narrow, sometimes lonely. Friends may mock you for not joining in, business partners might question your resolve, but beneath every sacrifice, an eternal currency accrues, unseen to all but God. You might be wondering at this point, is living like this worth it? Will it really change anything? Look at history, see the trail of world changers marked not by grandeur, but by simple acts of kingdom living, faith that fought injustice, love that broke racial divides, forgiveness that ended feuds. Consider the courageous peacemakers, Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, Desmond Tutu, who drew living water from the sermon's well and ignited movements that changed nations. But perhaps the most important story is not global, but intensely personal. It's yours. Every day brings dozens of crossroads where the sermon either shapes the next moment or fades into memory. You're at the grocery store. Do you let that impatient stranger ahead in line? You see someone lonely. Do you risk embarrassment for their comfort? It's 2 a.m. and anxiety claws for your thoughts. Do you lean into prayer or spiral into fear? In each small choice, the kingdom breaks in. This brings us to a deeper revelation. The righteousness Jesus preaches is impossibly demanding and yet stunningly accessible. It's not about giant leaps, but countless daily steps, each one possible because His Spirit whispers help within us. Imagine walking this ancient path in modern shoes, the sacred and the ordinary fused together. And yet the most pressing question lingers, stirring like a breeze before a storm. If every moment offers a chance to live out this righteousness, how do we keep from growing weary, burned out by an endless struggle for goodness? What you're about to discover in the next part will sweep you even higher. Because Jesus didn't speak of righteousness as an isolated ethic, but as the forward edge of a much larger vision, a prophetic hope that stretches beyond our own lifetimes. The implications of living this way ripple out, sparking possibilities that may upend everything you expect about the future. The next revelation could ignite your soul with the wildfire of holy anticipation. Are you ready to glimpse where this path leads? Step with me now to the brink of the present and peer ahead, eyes alight with the glow of prophetic promise. The words Jesus spoke on that Galilean hill were not only for hearers of His day, nor only for the trials of our own. Hidden within them is a blueprint for the future of humanity, for the world as it could be, and as it one day will be. The Sermon on the Mount is not just memory and morality. It pulses with forward-reaching anticipation, crackling with the electricity of things yet to come. Many believe the sermon is ancient wisdom, relevant but distant, its radical virtues too pure for the grinding teeth of history. But the profound truth is, beneath each of Jesus' commands lies a prophecy, a revelation of what happens when heaven's kingdom breaks through earth's chaos. Imagine Jesus peers into a future swirling with conflict and confusion, with nations divided, hearts fractured, and hope running thin. Do you sense it? His words echo beyond the generation that first heard them, like the ringing of a bell that refuses to fade. The world staggers under violence, greed, anxiety, and pride, yet Jesus plants within that soil seeds of a new creation. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Matthew 5:9. This is more than encouragement. It is a daring prediction, a vision of what people shaped by His righteousness will one day become. You might be wondering, can these teachings really reshape our collective destiny? Picture civilizations shaped by cycles of retribution, revenge, counterattack, never-ending feud. Now imagine a critical mass of people answering Jesus' call to forgiveness, turning enemies into allies and oppressors into family. The sermon isn't just a private ethic, it is the engine of history, the lever by which the old order is slowly being overturned. Foretells the answer to humanity's oldest wounds. Listen closely, and you'll hear the future churning beneath familiar phrases. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Matthew 5:14. Here, Jesus prophesies communities so transformed by righteousness that they blaze as beacons amid surrounding darkness. Families, neighborhoods, churches becoming outposts of a world yet to be revealed. Biblically, the prophets dreamed of such a day. Isaiah spoke of a time when nations will beat their swords into plowshares and learn war no more. Isaiah 2:4. The sermon is the DNA of this promised peace. But there is a tension here. The darkness sometimes deepens, and evil seems to tighten its grip. You might be tempted to despair. How can a handful of everyday acts usher in such a seismic shift? The answer is woven into Jesus' own vision of the kingdom come. It grows, often in secret, like yeast in dough or a seed in soil, invisible at first, but destined to transform the whole. This insight reveals something astonishing. Every time you forgive, when the world says, fight back. Every moment you exchange worry for trust. Every small act of peacemaking is an outpost of the age to come. Imagine the ripple, a single moment of courage, multiplied across thousands, then millions. Families reconciled, enemies befriended, despair replaced by hope. The prophecy encoded in the sermon is that the kingdom starts hidden, but swells and surges until the knowledge of the glory of the Lord covers the earth as the waters cover the sea. Habakkuk 2:14. Let's pause and feel the future. Feel its vibration running through the present, when Jesus declared, "Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." Matthew 6:10. He was not offering a sentimental prayer. He was sowing a revolution. See it. Somewhere, a child forgives a bully. A nation chooses reconciliation over war. A broken marriage is healed by relentless grace. These are the fingerprints of an approaching reality. What? The Bible calls the new creation, the world remade, not by power but by love. But this raises an even more radical question. What if all our acts of righteousness, no matter how hidden or ordinary, are rehearsals for our eternal vocation? Jesus says, "Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven." Matthew 5:12. This is not mere consolation after suffering, but a glimpse into a future where every seed of mercy we plant now will one day blossom into glory. The path of righteousness is not a detour, it's the main road to the coming world. Imagine with me, what if whole societies took the sermon seriously? Governments would prize the poor in spirit, legal systems would be driven by mercy, economic structures would prioritize peacemaking over profit. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? And yet history bears witness. Wherever the sermon has taken root, injustice loses ground and hope begins to spread. It was this vision that animated abolitionists who fought slavery, reformers who cared for orphans, peacemakers who reconciled enemies after war. These were not just good deeds, but embodied prophecy, living monuments to a future breaking in. Let's not miss the drama of contrast. Many voices today clamor for instant justice, for punishment, for drawing boundaries sharper and higher. But the kingdom Jesus prophesies flows the other way. Mercy over vengeance, patience over panic, reconciliation over rigid exclusion. Imagine feeling the quiet strength of this vision, sensing you are part of a movement that cannot be stopped, even when darkness presses in. But even this vision comes with a warning. The road is narrow. Jesus concludes his sermon with a prophecy of division, a final tension. Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom, but only the one who does the will of my Father." Matthew 7:21. The path of righteousness will always be contested, misunderstood, resisted, even by those closest to its source. Yet the promise remains: when the storm comes, those who have built on this rock will stand. Here is our mini conclusion, an exhilarating realization. The Sermon on the Mount is a lens into the destiny of the world. The traits Jesus blesses, meekness, mercy, purity, peacemaking, are not simply ethics for a broken present, but the pillars of God's final, unstoppable kingdom, which is even now rushing toward us. Maybe you feel it, a stirring within, a longing not just for private peace, but for a world restored. The Sermon on the Mount leaks prophecy into every corner of your life, whispering that nothing done in secret righteousness will ever be wasted, that every forgiven debt is written into eternity's account, that every quiet act of faith is a down payment on the world that is coming. But then comes Jesus' final riddle, his warning and his hope. Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Matthew 7:24. The future he speaks of isn't just passively awaited. It is fiercely built, decision by decision, heart by heart, every day. The kingdom comes through you, or it doesn't come at all. But this raises a question sharper than any before. If these prophetic possibilities are so immense, how do we anchor ourselves in the flow of God's future? How do we take hold of a kingdom rushing toward us and weave it into our ordinary, everyday lives? What you're about to witness next will take you from longing for the world to come to living as its vessel here and now. The journey ahead will reveal how the Sermon on the Mount isn't just prophecy, but invitation, an awakening to deeper connection with the very heart of God. The next revelation will draw you into the living current of righteousness, where destiny and devotion meet. Will you step forward? Pause. Feel the hush within, the ancient resonance vibrating through your soul. You've traced the sermon's historical context, grappled with its spiritual heights, wrestled with its call in the trenches of the modern world, and gazed at its sweeping prophetic horizon. Yet there remains a deeper layer, a hidden current that runs beneath all the teaching, a current that does not just command you, but draws you in, transforming everything from the roots up. This is the invitation to deepening spiritual connection, to let the teachings of Christ not merely instruct, but infuse every fiber of your being. Many imagine righteousness as arduous striving, a mountain too steep to climb alone. But the profound truth is, Jesus never intended these words to be a grim challenge undertaken in isolation. The Sermon on the Mount is less a test of personal perfection and more a doorway into divine partnership, an ongoing, living relationship with the Father, whose love gives the words their fire. You might be wondering, is it possible to move from merely following Jesus' teachings to truly knowing him, to walk in step with the heart that gave these words life? Imagine it, sitting alone, Bible resting open, the world's noise fading away. As you meditate on "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God," do you not sense the longing? Not just to do, but to be, not just to understand, but to encounter. Let your imagination enter the scene, before the bustle of work, before the demands of family, in the golden hush of early morning, you whisper the words under your breath. Suddenly, the distance between you and that hillside collapses. You are not just a reader, but a participant, a living stone in the temple Jesus is building. This is where righteousness transcends law and merges with intimacy. Feel the dramatic contrast. Religion says, perform to be accepted. But Jesus whispers, abide in me and you will bear much fruit. John 15:5. The Sermon on the Mount, radical as it is, becomes gentle, almost tender, when you realize its source is not a distant judge, but a present friend, a loving shepherd who longs to walk with you on this path. Imagine feeling the weight of this shift. Every beatitude, every challenge to hidden motives or hard forgiveness now feels less like a demand and more like an invitation to union. This is the mystery Paul describes. Christ in you, the hope of glory. Colossians 1:27. Righteousness is not an exam, but an embrace. You might ask, how does this connection actually happen? Here, the Sermon on the Mount opens its most transformative secret. Every command, do not worry, love your enemy, pray in secret, pulls you closer to the living presence who fulfills the law from the inside out. When you choose trust over anxiety at midnight, you are not alone. The Spirit lifts your hands in prayer. When you forgive someone who has wounded you, it is not just your own power at work, but the gentle press of Christ's love remaking your heart. Let's pause for a mini conclusion. An aha that whispers wonder. The deepest purpose of the Sermon on the Mount has always been to lead you into communion with God, to awaken your heart to His nearness in every act of hidden righteousness. This, in fact, is why secrecy and simplicity echo through the sermon. Jesus says, "Your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." Matthew 6:6. In a world obsessed with being seen, with building platforms and audiences, true righteousness flourishes in the quiet corners, in unseen prayers, in quiet acts of mercy. Here, spiritual connection grows not in applause, but in presence, in learning to be still with God, to listen, to rest. In His delight over you. Imagine the sensation, the transformation from the inside out. You once followed out of fear, measuring every deed. Now you are motivated by love. His love for you, your love for Him, spilling over into love for your neighbor. In this holy exchange, you feel the armor of isolation and self-effort falling away. Instead, you walk clothed in grace, participating in the very life of God. And with this realization arises a new way of seeing yourself and the world. Jesus calls His followers salt of the earth, light of the world, Matthew 5:13-14, not as a burden, but as a gift. The deeper your connection, the brighter your light. The more surrendered your heart, the more potent your impact. The mysterious paradox is that by dying to your own self-preservation, you actually become most truly yourself, alive, awake, attuned. But what does this connection look like practically? Picture moments when the Spirit prompts you to listen instead of speak, to comfort instead of accuse, to linger in prayer when distraction beckons. Each act, however small, becomes a stepping stone into deeper intimacy. Righteousness ceases to be an effort and becomes a flow. You might wonder, what if I fail? What if I grow cold or distant? Jesus anticipates this too. His invitation is not perfection, but pursuit. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. Matthew 7:7. This is the living heartbeat of the sermon, a Father longing for your knock, eager for your return, persistent in invitation. Even your weakness, your hunger, your thirst for righteousness is precious to Him. Imagine then, gathering with others who share this longing, hearts knit together, voices rising in worship, burdens shared and carried. The deeper your connection with God, the deeper your connection with others inevitably grows. Grace received alone becomes grace multiplied in community. Righteousness is not a solitary climb, but a shared ascent. Let's ground this in a vivid scene. A small group gathers in a circle, candles flickering, scriptures whispered. One confesses a hidden struggle, another offers prayer. A third brings comforting words. In this circle, the sermon breathes. Here, in the mess and miracle of real life, righteousness becomes shared strength. The boundaries between heaven and earth thin, and for a moment you glimpse the kingdom come. This shows us something profound. Every effort to deepen your spiritual connection is a step further into reality, not away from life, but closer to its fullest meaning. It is here, in the hiding place with God and the honest embrace with others, that transformation takes its deepest root. Yet even now, in this sanctuary of connection, the Spirit provokes a subtle discontent, a holy hunger. There is always more. The Sermon on the Mount beckons you ever further, offering wells of living water when you thought the journey was only about duty. But this raises a question that can't be ignored. How do we move from beautiful moments of spiritual insight to consistent, growing reality? How do we nurture this connection day after day, storm after storm, when the clamor of modern life threatens to drown out the whisper of God? What you're about to see in the next section will unlock the practical rhythms and powerful steps that turn longing into lifestyle. If you felt the stir of connection, but long to see it bear fruit, the wisdom ahead will equip you to walk the way of righteousness with confidence and joy, no longer as a distant goal, but as your daily, living reality. The greatest discoveries lie just ahead. Are you ready to let the Sermon on the Mount become the heartbeat of your everyday? Let's move from the heights of revelation to the familiar earth beneath our feet, from the sublime to the daily, from awe-filled visions to practical steps. Because if the Sermon on the Mount is to become more than words on ancient parchment, if it is to flow like living water through every corner of our days, then we must learn to take these brilliant insights and walk them out, step by step. The sacred becomes most real when it touches the ordinary. Many imagine spiritual growth as something given only to mystics or saints, some distant ideal reserved for the few. But the profound truth is this: the path of righteousness, illuminated by Jesus, is for everyone, everywhere, at any moment. Spiritual flourishing is not a prize for the exceptional, but a promise for the connected and persistent, those willing to begin again and again. You might be wondering, how do I actually live this out? How does the radical, upside-down kingdom of Jesus shape the patterns of my morning, my work, my relationships? Imagine yourself at the threshold of a new day, sunlight pooling at your window, the simplest things charged with divine possibility. The adventure of transformation is waiting, not in the dramatic, but in surrendered, intentional rhythms. The very first step is attention. The sermon starts not with action, but awakening. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Do you sense it? Cultivate moments of quiet, even brief ones, a minute of silence before you scroll, a prayer breathed on your commute. As these open the doors of perception, begin not by striving but by noticing your needs, your longings, the gentle nudge of God's presence. These moments create holy ground in the rush of daily life. Next comes honesty. Jesus' words dig past surface behavior to the roots of the heart. You have heard it said, but I say to you. Repentance is not shame, but courageous truth-telling, first to yourself, then to God. Take time each day to examine your heart. Where am I harboring anger, envy, or fear? Where am I hungry for a purity and peace that cannot be manufactured? This practice, shaped by grace, transforms vulnerability into fertile soil for God's work. Then there is surrender, the pivot from asking, "What must I do?" to praying, "Lord, let your will be done in me." Set aside moments for intentional surrender. As you make your morning coffee, say, "Today, let me hunger for your righteousness. Let mercy win over judgment in me." In each surrender, great or small, you open space for the Spirit to shape your day. But the journey doesn't stop with inward posture. Jesus' teaching demands courageous action. Go the second mile. Practice generosity. Buy lunch for a colleague unnoticed by others. Give quietly to someone in need, even when it pinches. Love your enemies. Write a message of encouragement to someone who critiques you, or pray for the person who most irks you. Feel the internal resistance, and let it be the very arena where spiritual muscle is formed. With every act, heaven's kingdom presses further into earth. You may be thinking, but what if I forget? What if my intentions fade by noon? Here, the wisdom of Jesus' rhythm is key. Spiritual growth is cultivated by simple, repeated practices. Establish anchors in your day: morning, midday, evening. In the morning, pause to read a beatitude or speak a short prayer. Lord, help me be poor in spirit today. At midday, reflect. Where have I seen your kingdom? Where have I resisted it? At night, confess. Missed moments, celebrate glimpses of grace, and rest in His mercy. Let's consider the powerful practice of secrecy. Jesus urges, when you give, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Matthew 6:3. Every hidden gift, every anonymous kindness, trains the soul to seek not applause, but the Father's reward. Try it, give, serve, love without anyone noticing. Let your inner world grow roots deeper than others' affirmation. Equally vital is the discipline of prayer. Jesus says, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father, who is unseen. Develop a secret history with God, a daily conversation, sometimes with words, often with silence, surrender, or the honest outpouring of your heart. When anxiety rises, speak the words Jesus gave, your kingdom come. In moments of stress or distraction, return to this breath prayer. Lord, make me attentive to you. And what of forgiveness? Here the sermon becomes demanding yet liberating. Practice regular forgiveness, even before you feel it fully. Write a name, say a prayer, or simply speak aloud, I release this debt. Each act unties knots that constrict the spirit, making space for joy to grow. Let's pause for a mini conclusion, an aha. The Sermon on the Mount is not a single leap, but a patient walking again and again on the path Jesus blazed. A path marked not by performance, but by presence, not by perfection, but by persistent return. You might be asking, how can I keep my passion alive? How do I not turn these practices into empty habit? Here's the secret. Let every discipline be infused with expectancy. See every small act as an invitation for encounter. Before you read a passage, whisper, Lord, what do you want to show me here? Before serving, pray, make this a moment of real love. Turn routine into doorway, habit into holy anticipation. And never walk alone. Spiritual growth accelerates in community. Find a friend, a group, a mentor, someone who can share joys, mourn failures, and celebrate growth. Gather weekly, share honestly, pray for each other. In mutual encouragement, the teachings take root in the soil of shared life. This reveals something profound. Practical steps, taken consistently and humbly, slowly form a new spiritual DNA within you. Over time, anger yields to gentleness, worry gives way to trust, generosity flows with less effort, and mercy becomes a reflex. The impossible ideals of Jesus become embodied possibilities, each step drawing you nearer, more integrated, more awake in Him. And yet, there remains a mystery. Even with these rhythms, something deeper stirs. The energy, the courage, the very desire to walk this path is itself a gift, a fire kindled by the Spirit through every act of surrender and every moment of honest prayer. But this brings us face to face with one final paradox, a question that both beckons and unsettles. How do these private habits and small acts multiply as a force that can impact whole families, friendships, churches, a community, a world transformed? What comes next will draw you into the living mosaic of faith, stories of shared journeys, trials weathered together, laughter and tears woven into a tapestry of communal righteousness. Because the secret of the Sermon on the Mount is this: not just spiritual growth for one, but awakening for many. To discover how your small steps ignite a community, stay with us for what might just be the most surprising revelation yet. What happens when the fire of the Sermon on the Mount doesn't remain a flicker in a single heart, but spreads, igniting the lives of many? Imagine the hush on that Galilean hillside as one face after another absorbs the words of Jesus, eyes brimming with curiosity, conviction, and the wild hope that maybe, just maybe, they're not alone in this longing for a new kind of righteousness. Could it be that the truest beauty of Jesus' teachings is unlocked? Not in individual achievement, but in the alchemy that happens when souls gather, convictions intertwine, and faith becomes flesh and blood within a living, breathing community. Many picture spiritual growth as an intensely private affair, a solitary climb up the steep face of devotion. But the profound truth is, the very DNA of the Sermon on the Mount is communal. Jesus speaks not to isolated ascetics, but to a ragtag collection of ordinary people, men and women, friends and strangers, the broken and the bold, each invited to become salt of the earth, light of the world, together. There's a subtle mystery here. Righteousness shines brightest not in personal isolation, but in shared experience. Picture it, a circle of friends gathered in a cramped living room, the air tinged with laughter and the scent of coffee. They open the scriptures, not as critics or scholars, but as hungry seekers. One reads, "Blessed are the peacemakers," and suddenly a recent conflict at work or at home surfaces raw and real. Supported by the group, she confesses her struggle to forgive. Another offers a story of reconciliation. Hands reach out, tangible. Reminders that mercy is not theory, but a rhythm that pulses through human connection. Bit by bit, wounds are tended and hope is rebuilt. This is the sermon lived out, not in silence, but in shared vulnerability. You might be wondering, how does a community actually embody the radical call of Jesus? The answer is both startling and simple, through holy, ordinary habits of togetherness. Jesus' city on a hill doesn't rise overnight. Every meal shared with a newcomer, every wrong forgiven, every resource pooled for someone in crisis, each prayer whispered for another's need, all are bricks laid in a structure shaped by grace. Imagine the sensory reality of such a place. Voices rising in worship, arms linked in prayer, the clink of dishes washed by many hands, laughter echoing after a long week, or tears falling as confessions are spoken. It's in these deeply human moments, marinated in imperfection, yet seasoned with steadfast love, that righteousness comes alive. Let's pause and glimpse some living parables that might unfold right where you are. In a small church, a widow faces a mountain of medical bills. Quietly, her community rallies. Generous envelopes slipped into mailboxes, casseroles delivered, rides provided. She never walks alone. In a college group, two friends fall out bitterly, one wounded by gossip, the other by pride. Yet through honest dialogue and prayer, humility and forgiveness eclipse. Resentment. Their story kindles courage in those watching. If God can mend them, maybe He can heal us too. In the crowded city, neighbors, strangers divided by culture and creed, gather for a block party hosted by a cluster of believers. What begins as awkward small talk grows into friendships, shared babysitting, borrowed tools, and an unspoken promise. We see you. You matter here. The teaching of Jesus, "Let your light shine before men," becomes reality on cracked pavement and between kitchen tables. But don't miss the tension. Community is beautiful, yes, but also costly and raw. Living out the sermon's demands alongside others often exposes our impatience, envy, or pride in ways solitude never could. Yet it is in this refiner's fire that transformation is accelerated. True shared faith invites accountability. Who will help you notice resentment hiding in your words, or hold you close as you grieve a loss too heavy to bear alone? Who will remind you to return, that the kingdom is given to those poor enough in spirit to ask for help? Here's the brilliance revealed. Every act of communal righteousness, every group that resists the pull of gossip, every family that chooses honest apology over seething silence, every church that pours resources into the hurting rather than into comfort, builds an ecosystem of grace, oxygen for weary souls, fertile ground for the fruit Jesus promised. You might ask, how do we cultivate such a community? How do we guard against shallow niceness or empty ritual? The rhythm is discovered in intentional practices. Create space for one another living. Have regular, open-hearted gatherings where joys are celebrated and burdens are shared. Normalize confession of sin, doubt, and hope. Celebrate every second-mile story. The time someone brought a meal, forgave a debt, or quietly met a need and tried to tell no one. Teach the Beatitudes not just as virtues, but as community DNA. Small acts matter. A child is included in worship and given a voice. Newcomers are enfolded, not scrutinized. Old wounds are named so they might in gentleness be healed. In such a culture, the vision of Jesus, a city set on a hill, ceases to be a slogan and becomes a living, breathing beacon that draws the lost, the lonely, and those still peeking from the shadows, longing to belong. Here is a mini conclusion, a sacred aha. The greatest miracles of the Sermon on the Mount often happen in circles. The everyday saints who carry one another, call out beauty, and lift their gaze together beyond what any could see alone. But a deeper mystery pulses beneath this communal life. The more we gather, serve, forgive, and celebrate together, the more we glimpse the heart of God Himself. A Father who delights to see His children united, whose kingdom is a family reunion with space for all. Yet even now, a final tension lingers. As hearts knit together in faith, questions surface. What about those on the margins, those left behind, those wounded by the very community meant to heal them? If our shared faith must reflect Christ, how do we carry His reconciling presence into the darkest corners and fractured places? What comes next will take us to the edge of this mystery, into the sacred stories of personal transformation, redemption out of failure, and hope where none seem possible. Because the culmination of the Sermon on the Mount is not found in theory or ritual, but in the living testimonies of real people like you who have seen these teachings set them free. What you're about to hear might just be the most powerful revelation yet. Are you ready to step into the story? Imagine you're standing on that ancient hillside, the air cool against your skin, the voice of Jesus echoing through stone and heart. But suddenly, the crowd recedes, and in the quiet, His words are for you alone. The journey of the Sermon on the Mount is no longer an abstract manifesto or distant ideal. It has become a mirror reflecting the depths of your own story. Many believe righteousness is reserved for the pious, the unblemished, the unwavering, but the profound truth is, Jesus' words are most transformative in the scars and trembling places, the everyday failures, secret doubts, and the humbling hunger to begin again. Righteousness, in the sermon's vision, is not a badge for the perfect, but a path for all the broken, all the searching, all the thirsty. You might be wondering, can these words truly change my life? Am I too far, too flawed, too late? Listen closely, because this is where the spiritual journey becomes intensely personal. Picture a woman once crippled by resentment, her childhood battered by wounds, her adulthood shrouded in mistrust. Years of bitterness etched creases in her heart like stone. Until one day, while reading, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you," she pauses. The words sting and soothe. Tears come, anger wrestles with grace, but she whispers a shaky prayer, "Help me forgive." It doesn't happen overnight, yet slowly, burden by burden, her chains loosen. She reaches out to a sibling she hadn't spoken to in years. There are setbacks, yes, but with every faltering step, she senses something new. She is not alone. Jesus is beside her in every act of courage. Or consider a weary father whose anxiety gnawed at him like a cold draught in an empty house, always planning, always worrying, until the night his child, eyes wide in the dark, asked, "Daddy, do you believe God will really take care of us?" In that moment of raw honesty, the father remembers, "Do not worry about tomorrow, but seek first the kingdom." He stumbles into prayer, not as a ritual, but as a rescue. Each night, he learns to surrender. Another fear. Anxiety is not banished in a day, but trust deepens with every sun that rises. Let's feel the weight of these moments. The Beatitudes are not simply declarations, but invitations to transformation, handcrafted for real stories, for haunted consciences, aching marriages, sleepless nights, and unexpected grace. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted," Jesus declares, and somewhere, a heart stitched together by loss finds the courage to hope again. Perhaps you feel more like the outcast, the overlooked, the poor in spirit. The world barely glances your way, yet the sermon calls your name in tenderness. Yours is the kingdom of heaven. Your nothingness, your hunger, your longing are not obstacles, but the very doorways to divine blessing. Imagine a young man, shunned and misunderstood, who dared to believe these words for himself. He began volunteering at a shelter for others discarded by society. In serving, he sensed dignity awakening within, the truth ringing in his bones. He is seen, loved, and called. Let's pause and look closer. What unites these transformative stories? Not perfection, but honest reflection and a willingness to let God's vision reframe everything. The process is not linear. There are relapses and regrets, moments of loss and breakthrough, the rhythm of falling and rising, but always with an unfolding sense of newness. The sermon is written over time on the fleshly tablets of the heart, 2 Corinthians 3:3. You may be asking, what step can I take today? How can this teaching shape the contours of my own journey? Begin with a holy sense of curiosity, a prayerful daring to look into the shadows with Jesus beside you. Ask, where am I hiding bitterness? Where do I still clutch control? Where have I settled for half-light instead of honest confession or costly mercy? He invites you not to condemnation, but to freedom. Now imagine a small cluster of friends gathering once a week amid the debris of busy lives. They share failures and victories, prayers both desperate and victorious. One weeps, another laughs. Stories tumble out, how a job loss uncovered deeper trust, or how forgiving a parent unleashed a flood of healing. In this circle, the words of Jesus cease to be ancient script and become breath, oxygen for wounded souls. Or picture a church extending an olive branch to a former adversary, a businessman sacrificing profit for integrity, a teenager choosing to tell the truth when hiding would be easier. These aren't fairy tales. They're the small, steady miracles of righteousness at work in real time. Let's gather up these stories and let them ignite an aha. The Sermon on the Mount is not merely an unreachable standard, but a living story being written in every heart willing to risk the journey. Each act of obedience, each stride toward mercy, each trembling surrender in the dark kindles a chain reaction. The world shifts, not in headlines, but in households, friendships, and hidden places, wherever faith sparks flesh and blood action. But here, the tension pulls again. No journey of transformation is without echoes of doubt, days when old wounds still ache, when the gap between Jesus' vision and our reality gapes wide. Yet even this is grace. Jesus never promised absence of struggle, but presence in the storm. Growth is not a ladder, but a spiral, step by step, sometimes seeming to double back, but always rising, always drawn deeper by his unwavering love. You might sense it now, the burning question beneath all others. What if the next step I take changes everything? What if the Sermon on the Mount, lived honestly and humbly, could set not just me, but entire families, workplaces, even cultures free? What comes next is not the end, but the beginning. Your story joining the great chorus of transformed lives. Because the Sermon on the Mount is a seed planted in your spirit. What it becomes depends not just on reading, but on surrender, on risking love and forgiveness where it hurts most, on choosing humility amid pride, on seeking God in every moment. But this raises the most stunning question yet. If the future of righteousness is a story waiting to be written in you, what breathtaking possibilities might unfold if you dared to say yes today? The journey doesn't end here. Ahead of you are new mercies, deeper discoveries, and a voice, steady, loving, persistent, still calling you higher. Are you ready to take the next step? The greatest revelation is always just ahead. You've journeyed with me, step by courageous step, up the path that began on a sunlit Galilean hillside. Now, in this final stretch, pause and take in the landscape that's come into view. Look back and witness the trail of revelation, sacrifice, and hope, winding upward from ancient words to living flame. Perhaps you came doubting, or wrestling, or simply longing for something real in the noise and restlessness of daily life. But now, having tasted the depths of Jesus' words on true righteousness, can you sense how much has shifted within? Pause and honor how far you've come. When we bring all these truths together, something unmistakable emerges. The Sermon on the Mount is not simply a collection of beautiful teachings or impossible ideals. No, it is the revealed rhythm of God's own heart, a living pattern echoing through the centuries, reshaping those who dare to listen and respond. Righteousness, as Jesus defines it, isn't reserved for the flawless or the outwardly holy, but is poured out like rain on all who hunger, who mourn, who long for peace, who ache to see God's face in the ordinary and the overlooked. This is your inheritance. This is the invitation to move beyond seeing righteousness as a ladder to climb and to embrace it as a river to enter, a presence to welcome, a reality to inhabit with every breath. Do you feel it? The scattered fragments of do this and be that have formed a single radiant whole, a summons to become like Christ, not in theory but in lived experience. Now we can clearly see that every aspect of your journey, your struggles with forgiveness, your quiet acts of mercy, your wrestling with anxiety, your longing for community and meaning, all belong in this divine tapestry. Each moment matters. Each choice is a thread God weaves into his story of redemption. When Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, the peacemakers, the pure in heart," he was not naming a distant ideal, but tracing the outline of your true destiny. And right here, as this realization crests, let the words land with full force. Those who embrace the sermon's call are not the world's outcasts, but the world's hope-bearers. In a world that demands payback, you are invited to sow forgiveness. In a culture of anxiety, you are given peace that surpasses understanding. In a society obsessed with applause, your every secret act of love becomes the currency of a kingdom to come. Many live by reaction, by self-preservation, by scarcity, but you are invited to live by overflowing grace. This is not self-improvement, but spirit empowerment, not empty rituals, but life set ablaze from within. Remember that striking visual metaphor, the city set on a hill. Imagine countless flickering windows, circles of light in a bruised and shadowed world. Each window, a life that has said yes to the startling upside-down kingdom Jesus describes. Each window, a household where enemies become family, where the lonely discover belonging, where hearts are honest and hands are open. Through you, through us, God's righteousness radiates outward, lighting one corner, then another, until the whole earth is illuminated. Let your heart rise now as we move into a moment of emotional crescendo. If you've ever felt powerless to change, hear this. The Sermon on the Mount is proof that transformation begins in the overlooked places, in a whispered prayer, a courageous apology, a hand extended to a stranger. Imagine, just for a moment, your life rewritten by these truths. Imagine releasing that unforgiven grudge at last. Imagine trusting God with tomorrow's worries, letting burdens fall like autumn leaves. Imagine your circle of friends deepening as you dare to be vulnerable, to share needs, to celebrate acts of quiet righteousness. Imagine your family, your workplace, your neighborhood shifting as the kingdom takes root, not in grand gestures, but in small, relentless acts of love. Let me share a story. Not long ago, a weary mother, exhausted by family conflict, stumbled on the words, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." She set aside her pride and wrote a simple message of reconciliation to her sister, estranged for years. That act was the first spark, awkward but honest. It opened a pathway and over months transformed a legacy of silence into something resembling hope. Her step rippled outward, blessing not just her sister but her children, her friends. In the kingdom Jesus describes, no act of faithfulness, even the smallest, is ever wasted. This is God's moment for you, not tomorrow, not someday, but right now. Imagine how your life would change if you surrendered the divided allegiance, the hidden wounds, the self-protection, and let Christ's vision of righteousness penetrate everything. Imagine the freedom waiting in forgiveness, the courage rising in honest confession, the joy blossoming as you seek not applause, but God's secret reward. Imagine being swept up, not by the world's demands, but by God's relentless restoring love. The path ahead is not smooth. Living these beatitudes, these bold commands, will invite both blessing and backlash, but you do not walk alone. The Spirit of Jesus, who spoke these words centuries ago, walks beside you, within you, empowering every yes you whisper. Community surrounds you, whether gathered in circles of prayer, partnering to meet needs, or simply sharing the struggle and the hope. This spiritual journey is both fiercely individual and magnificently shared. So take the next step. Here are 3 invitations I offer you today. First, choose one beatitude or teaching from the sermon that spoke to you most powerfully during this series. Write it out, carry it with you. Pray over it each morning. Allow it to shape your days for the next month. When you do, watch for the subtle ways your perspective shifts and jot these moments down. Second, reach out to one person with whom you desire deeper reconciliation or understanding. Maybe it's a family member, a friend, a co-worker. Risk one conversation, one act of kindness, even if imperfect. Offer and receive grace. Every bridge you build is a stone in the city on a hill. Third, join or create a circle of spiritual companionship. Maybe it's a church group, a gathering of neighbors, or just 2 or 3 friends committed to doing life with Jesus at the center. Share honestly, pray for one another, amplify each other's small steps of righteousness. When you begin to walk this path together, you set in motion the kind of movement that ignites families, workplaces, entire neighborhoods with light and belonging. Each of these acts, simple, specific, possible, is a way of answering the sermon's deepest call. And as you do, you become part of a living story that stretches back to Galilee and runs forward into eternity. Now I want to hear from you. This journey is bigger than any one heart. It's a chorus, a community. What teaching from the sermon challenged or changed you most? What step are you willing to take next, however small? Share your story in the comments so that we can encourage and pray for one another. You never know whose life might be changed by your honesty and courage. Let's create a living archive of transformation, a city of stories that cannot be hidden. If this series has awakened something in you, if you're hungry for more, not just intellectual insight, but real spiritual fuel, make sure to stay connected. In future videos, we'll be diving deeper into how Jesus' teachings unlock not just personal transformation, but healing and justice in our world. More is coming. Insight that builds, hope that grows, strength for the journey. Don't miss what God has yet to reveal. And so, as we close, carry these words with you, letting them echo in the silent places of your heart and in the wild, open spaces of your life. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Let them ring. Let them burn away every shadow of insignificance, every lie that says your choices do not matter. You are called, you are commissioned, you are loved, and through you the world shines brighter.